Okay, so we're going to review the 2024 Major League Baseball London Series. We do this every time. I think it was a better series this year than last year. I think it was they were more enjoyable games to watch. I think some of the rule changes with the pitching clock I think have sped up play a little bit. There were less empty seats, which was a positive to see. Fans weren't leaving early like they were last year. I think scheduling it slightly earlier in June I think is also a benefit. More families in attendance because later on in the summer more people go abroad on holiday, or as the Americans would say, vacation. So more families in attendance, less empty seats. I think the scheduling side of things, they were in a bit of a catch-22 with the Champions League final taking place the week before and the Euros starting obviously later this week on Friday in Germany. They wanted to have prime viewership basically for the domestic media in the UK and the wider media across Europe outside of the US. I think that was very, very important. But there was a scheduling clash. You had the Rugby League Challenge Cup final at Wembley and you had the Rugby Union Premiership final at Twickenham taking place on the Saturday. So I think that potentially overshadowed the baseball on Saturday with those two big finals that had bigger crowds than at the London Stadium. Yes, both those stadiums are bigger capacity stadiums. They're two of the bigger stadiums in London, but more fans are in attendance at Twickenham and at Wembley than at the London Stadium. So that was an unfortunate scheduling clash, but it was the only real slot in June they could do. Major League Baseball very, very conscious of the Euros taking place in Germany in June and July, so to try and schedule it later in the summer was a big no-go. The TV audience just would not be there. And of course, that advertising revenue that they would get would just not be there because most of the world's TV audience will be watching the Euros in Germany throughout June and July. On a fan in attendance standpoint, there were a lot of US fans this year that had come over, a lot of Philly fans especially. Now there are Major League Baseball fans obviously in the UK and in Europe, we know this. Whether they're in as larger numbers as the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, I mean, time will tell if there's a bigger fandom than we realise. But most of the fans in attendance were already existing fans, so I don't know how Major League Baseball is going to entice new fans to the game, if we're being honest. I think this is where like sports and leagues like the NFL, the NBA and the NHL, I think have definitely grown their fan bases in Europe with their consistency in going to Europe. I mean, the NHL is now going to Australia and all over the world, but they've been going to Europe for a lot longer. They've established themselves in Europe a lot earlier, which I think has helped their brands. I think Major League Baseball's behind the curveball, excuse the pun, in that regard. I think most of the fans in attendance were existing fans, so I don't know how at the moment this London series is growing the fandom with new fans going to games, because I think most of the fans, even local fans from the UK or resident in London or in Europe who went, were existing fans, let's be honest. The percentage of American fans there, I think, was higher this year than last year. I think last year it was around 30% of fans in attendance came from the US. I think it was higher this year because of the two teams involved. On a broadcasting standpoint, I think there is still a massive room for improvement. Now, I know on the Saturday, the Challenge Cup final took precedence on the live main BBC channels. I understand that, but they need to make it easier to find on the BBC website as one of the co-broadcasters. I also know that on Saturday, TNT Sports, most of their broadcasting was with the Rugby Union final. So that broadcasting clash, they do need to make it easier to access online. It was buried on the BBC website, which is not good. I don't know what the broadcasting was like for the US fans domestically in the US, but there needs to be more room for improvement on the broadcasting side. Especially Sunday, they could have had the Sunday game on one of the BBC One or BBC Two. Quite honestly, it was really hard to find on the BBC website. It was really buried, which was really disappointing, considering they were the prime sporting event on the Sunday. On the Saturday, yes, you could understand. Okay, maybe having it on the BBC website make it easier to access. That's something that the broadcasters and Major League Baseball need to work out for 2 years' time when they return to London. Now, they're going to Paris next year. I wouldn't be surprised if similar issues arise in Paris, which is the first time they're going to Paris. They need to improve the coverage, basically. Another thing that is still an ongoing concern is the promotion side of things. Now, I saw a bit more promotion this time round than last year. Last year, I saw one advert in the build-up to the 2023 games. I did see more stuff online in the build-up to the London Games this year. They started a bit earlier as well in regards to the promotional advertising aspect and the promotional materials they put on YouTube and on other social media platforms. So I did see more, and they started earlier in the year doing some crossovers with cricket, which I think was a good thing, but still nowhere near the level of 2019. 2019, they went really hard and fast with their advertising and promotion. Yes, they using Jimmy Carr they got wrong. I think they've definitely worked out the cricketing angle. I think is a better way to go to try and maybe attract some cricket fans over to look at baseball, because there are some similarities with both sports and their origins are pretty similar sports historically going back a couple of hundred years. Using players like Josh Butler I think is a positive. They didn't do it enough. While I saw more adverts and more promotional materials online than I did last year, still not enough. They're still not winning the hearts and minds, in my opinion, because, as I said, I think most of the fans in attendance were pre-existing fans. So, and with that lack of consistency, where they're not coming back next year, I think that potentially does damage Major League Baseball's brand a little bit with reaching out to newer fans. And that's my personal opinion. Other people might have a different opinion on how the games played out. I think the games were pretty good. I have no complaints with the speed of play was a lot faster than last year. We didn't have the mascot race like we did last year. I do think they got some of the timings of things wrong last year. I think Major League Baseball's improved the playing product that we actually see on the field. But I still think there's some things they can work out. I think ticket prices... I looked online on Saturday morning. Last minute ticket deals for like £45 were not bad. They were, I think, a little bit more reasonable for the lower end tier ticketing. I didn't see what the more expensive tickets were like, but that was a criticism in past years, was the ticketing price and the availability of tickets. They were still selling them on the day of Saturday and Sunday at reasonable prices. The start times, I think the Saturday game could potentially be a bit earlier. Again, that's just a personal preference. I understand, obviously, over in the US they will have evening games. I think the Sunday start time was fine. But I still think that potentially have that Saturday game a little bit earlier in the day, just to avoid that travel chaos on a weekend evening in London. I think this is where Major League Baseball doesn't quite realise the travel infrastructure. Well, we do have, compared to America, really good public transportation links. There's been a lot of engineering works on the trains, a lot of strikes, and so transport on a weekend anywhere in the UK by public transport is chaotic at best. And that's on a good weekend. There's a lot of engineering works on the railway lines into London where I live. That's an ongoing theme. It's almost every weekend they're shutting some form of entrance into London. So getting fans to and from, I think, is quite important. So maybe adjust those start times to work with public transportation. But thankfully this year we didn't see the mass exodus that we did last year. So it was a better atmosphere, less empty seats. But the fact they were still having tickets for sale on the day of the first game, wasn't a sellout. There were still tickets to be had. Now, paid and actual attendance are two different things, so we'll see what the viewership's like and the actual paid and actual attendance is like when they fully release all those figures of people who actually did turn up with their tickets. But I do think overall the product is improving. But I still think the broadcasting side of things needs to improve massively. I really do. There were times where they cut away from the BBC broadcast to go to, in breaks in play, to go on one of the little documentary snippets of baseball in Europe, or looking at replays of the All-Star game and recent games and last year's games, and they would miss the first pitch of the next inning. And so they were missing action. And so they need to get some of these things ironed out. On a US standpoint, I don't know what the US fans made of it. I haven't had any feedback yet. It'll be interesting to hear from US fans who actually woke up early to watch the games. I think most of the US baseball fans would have been on the East Coast from New York and Philly, but there might have been, fans on the West Coast or in the Midwest who may have wanted to watch the games who were just baseball fans. I don't know what the American feedback was, but yeah, I think there's still some room for improvement. But the product is better than what it was in 2019. I think they've learned a lot of the lessons from 2019. There is still room for improvement in the promotion side of it, the advertising, and the broadcasting. The actual play itself, I think, has improved. I am finding it interesting that scoring is still down on 2019. Whether that's to do with pitchers being injured, batters being injured, the speed of the play being sped up, causing more injuries. That could have something to do with it. The weather conditions could have something to do with it. Thankfully, it was dry on both days. There was a chance of potentially some passing rain showers. It was cooler, which I think potentially helped. Last year it was roasting hot, and you could see it actually on the field. The stadium design traps the air, doesn't allow a lot of breeze, and the heat just is trapped in a bowl. And last year's games, it was very, very noticeable with the pitches really just sweating at the mound very, very visibly. It was very, very hot last year. So we'll see what they come up with for Paris next year, and of course in 2026 when they return to London, and the teams that they will have slated in for those games. But for me, for now, thank you very much for watching. If you watched here in the UK on the TV, what are your thoughts if you're a baseball fan here in the UK or in Europe? And if you're a baseball fan from the US, I want to hear your thoughts as well on the London Series, and is it success? Has it had the same kind of success that the NFL series in London has had, or when the NBA and the NHL take games to Europe? Is it having that same kind of success, not only rewarding the fans that already exist, but also attracting new fans to the product? So that's it from me for now. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll have some more content for you guys and girls very, very soon.